My name is Blair Williams. Today is April 5th, 2018, and I'm here today in the apartment of Betty Goodhart. So thank you, Betty, for having me here.
Sure.
So the first thing I'll ask is, do you know how your family first came to reside in Cumberland County?
All I know is my father's father was a paint contractor, and they lived back in Chestnut Street on Mount Holly. And then my dad married my mother, who lived in a farm over on Mountain Street in Mount Holly. She was an only child. Well, she had a half-brother. And I don't know how they got to... I know more about my husband than I know about myself, but he wasn't born and raised in Mount Holly.
Okay.
I was. But I lived on East Pine Street in Mount Holly at 205. And from the time I was born, we went to church at the Methodist Church in Baltimore Avenue. And there was 5 of us children. There was 3 girls and 2 boys. And we went to church every Sunday, and you know, we were very active. My mother and dad were active in the church. And as I grew up, I went to the Methodist Church down at Mount Zion, United Methodist. But when I moved here to Chapel Point, when it was snowy and icy, I didn't want to drive out there, so I started going here at Chapel Point. And I like it very much, but I still keep in contact with the United Methodist at Mount Zion. And I'm on the prayer chain there, so that kind of keeps me active with them. But, and I was married in the United Methodist Church on Front Street in Mount Holly in 1951. And we always, you know, I loved the church. I had a real good Sunday school teacher, Esther Carter. She's passed already, but she was a very good Sunday school teacher. And she even had, we might have been, when I had her, we might have been around 12 years old, but she had, it was really mostly girls. There was hardly any boys. I don't even know if there was a separate Sunday school class for boys. But she even had class meetings at her house for us, and we played games. And she was she knew the Bible inside and out. So that was really a good thing for me.
What were your parents' names?
Arietta Cohill. She was Arietta Packard Cohill, and my dad's name was Charles Eugene Cohill.
You mentioned they were active in the church.
Yes.
What roles did they play?
Well, when they did anything, like if they made Easter eggs or they had suppers or anything they could do, they would do. Yes.
And was your mother a part of the United Methodist Women, or?
She probably was,
Okay.
yes. Because, you know, from the time I was born, that's the only place we went.
Sure.
And I remember of going and helping, you know, with some suppers. And they always made all kind of Easter eggs and everything. And we girls, the 3 of us girls, would go and help wrap them and things
Are
like
those
that.
chocolate Easter, like
Yes,
chocolate
yes.
peanut butter?
They made cherry and nut and all kinds of Easter eggs. Peanut butter, coconut, whatever, I think. But it was just a lot of different kinds.
You know, I have a United Methodist chocolate Easter egg in my bag right now.
Do you? Good. Yeah, I think they're well known for things like that.
It's not from Mount Zion.
No.
Yeah. What was Mount Zion known for anything in particular, like a dinner or?
You mean Mount Zion, where I just finished going to?
Yeah, the
Yes,
Methodist Church.
they have dinners. In fact, this weekend they're having a Popeye supper.
Okay.
And they don't charge for it. You just give them whatever you think it's worth. And they have those every so often. And then they have roast beef dinners. And Mount Zion my dad never went to Mount Zion,
Okay.
but I did.
Okay.
After I was married and my husband's parents, the reason we started there, his parents went there.
Okay.
And we used to take them to church as they got older.
Right. That's in South Middleton.
It's right in front of PPG.
Okay.
Do you know where the glass company is? It's the road from Mount Holly to Willing Springs.
Oh, okay.
I think it's called Park Drive.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm thinking of a different
Yeah.
Methodist church.
Yes.
On 94.
No. That's probably Victory.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I never went there.
All right. But what about the Methodist Church on Baltimore Street?
On Baltimore Street.
Were they known for any particular dinners or?
Well, I was so little then. I really,
Okay.
They had dinners,
Mm-hmm.
and they served after weddings and things like that. And, but, it was wonderful growing up, being in that church, because I remember they did have a boys' Sunday school class, and they did things, and then the girls did a lot of things. Of course, I was a Girl Scout when I was a young
Okay.
person, and we did a lot of things up in the Holly Park, up beyond Deer Lodge, on up through that road towards. Do you know where the CC Road is?
No, but is this like the Marsh Preserve Road?
March Preserve, I don't think. Well, it might be.
Right behind the Deer Lodge?
Yes,
there? Yeah.
it went up. There was a spring there. You would go get water. A lot of people would get all their water there. And there was people came from as far as Harrisburg to get water there. They would get a whole station wagon in the back full of gallon jugs of water. So now we never got it at my home. Now when we would go up that way, we would take a cup along and drink the water. Yeah, but on up through there, there was a lot of fishing. Now, before my time, my dad used to talk about there was a kind of like a park up through there. And he would go up and, they'd ride I guess they had roller coasters and things up there. I don't ever remember that.
I think it was for the Holly Trolley. It was like the end of
Well, that's before I've heard of the Holly Trolley, but that was before my time.
Did your parents talk about the Holly Trolley at all?
Oh, yeah, they rode it. Yeah. Yeah, but I never did. I wish I could have.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, I'm assuming you attended elementary school in Mount
Oh,
Holly?
yes. We went there from grade 1. We didn't have kindergarten, but we went from grade 1 through grade 9. And our principal was Mr. Messinger. Very strict, but a very nice man.
Yeah.
Yes, no problems in school like they have now.
Well, are there any particular teachers that stand out to you all these years?
Janet Hartzell.
Okay.
She was a very good teacher. Very strict, but very nice. And Helen Hine, Mrs. Hine, I think, I'm sure she was married. She was our first grade teacher. She was a really sweet lady. She was from Carlisle. But I remember her. And then Alma Nicky was my second grade teacher, and she was very nice. They were all nice, really. Yes. But I remember this Mrs. Hall. I don't know where she lived. She didn't live in Mount Holly. But she always kept half of a lemon in a dish. This is funny to think of her and think of this, but this is how I remember her. And every once in a while, she would get that lemon and squeeze a little bit out in her mouth. I guess her mouth got very dry. But that's one thing. I think everybody remembers that about her. But she was a very nice teacher and a good teacher. Yeah. They were all very good teachers in Mount Holly. Never had a problem with any of them.
And then Did you choose to go on to Boiling Springs?
Carlisle.
Carlisle. Okay.
Yes, when we finished ninth grade in Mount Holly, we came, it wasn't a school bus like today. It was just a bus.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember Biddle Klepper, he was from Mount Holly, he drove the school bus. And he picked us up at the square in Mount Holly. Now, I walked from 205 East Pine Street while I was in school in Mount Holly all those years. We'd walk to school in the morning, we'd walk home at lunch, we'd walk back after lunch, and then we'd walk home in the evening. There was no school buses like today. And it didn't really hurt us. And then, now we were talking about when I went to Carlisle. If you passed ninth grade, which most people did, we came to Carlisle to the Lamberton High School. And we finished our high school there. And that's where I met my husband.
Okay.
Yes. And I thought Lamberton School was very nice, but we had different classes. We changed. We didn't do that in Mount Holly. You stayed in one classroom the whole time. Yes.
But different grades in each class.
Yes,
Yeah.
different grades. Yes.
What-
The schoolhouse now that I went to that's the Mount Holly Springs Fire Company.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Citizen.
Yeah.
I'm trying to order the questions in my head, so I apologize.
That's all right.
So by the time that you were in high school, World War II was already over. Is that right? Or
I don't think it was over. Let's see. World War II. I remember the Depression, and I remember World War II. That would be in the 40s,
Yep.
wouldn't it? Yeah. I graduated in 50, so it would have been during that when I was in high school.
Okay.
Yes.
Well, what were those two sort of?
That time frame?
Yeah. I imagine that. Both of those experiences would have had a pretty big impact on you
yes,
growing up.
it did. I can remember before I went to Carlisle, it was the beginning of the Depression. And because I went to Carlisle in 1948 is when I went. So the war was over then.
Yeah.
Most of the war and, part of the Depression was during the earlier years in Mount Holly. And the Holly Theater was open then, and we used to do war bond shows. In fact, I have a picture somewhere, I don't know where it is, of three of us girls. I played the boy part, and they were the girl parts, and they had real fancy, ruffly dresses, and I had, just a pair of white pants, and I must have been on my knees before they took that picture because the knees were dirty. And I had kind of like a sailor hat and everything. But we used to put these shows on down at the Holly Theater, and we would sell war bonds. And we really sold a lot of war bonds that way. But there was a lot of people who took part in those. But I do remember that. Yeah.
What did your father do for a job?
He was a paint contractor.
He was a paint contractor.
He had men
So
working
how
for him.
was he impacted by the Depression and then by the war?
Well, with 5 children, we had food stamps and stamps for sugar and gas and shoes and everything. And that was hard because, we had a vegetable garden though. We had a vegetable garden, and they planted all their own vegetables, and we ate a lot of vegetables. And I remember when I was little, we had 2 pigs that they would get every year, and we had a place down way at the back of our place where we lived. And they would raise these pigs till they got big, and then some man would come and kill them somehow. They would never let us out there to see that. And then we would help them, with different, I remember of cutting the fat from the hog into little pieces, and they would put it in this big black iron kettle, and that would make lard for them. And we didn't have a freezer or a refrigerator or anything like that at home. The milk man came, the bread man came to the house, and the ice man came. And we had a wooden refrigerator that he put the ice at the top, and then there was a tray down below that would, catch the drippings. And I remember us kids, when we knew the iceman was out there, we'd all run out to the truck, and when he chopped the ice, there would be little chips fly off that we could, and then he always chipped us some too. But the ice was made in Mount Holly too at that time.
Was it?
Yes. Down around where the Pennsylvania Dutch candy plant used to be. That's where the ice house was. Yes.
Well, and then you said you met your husband.
Yes. He was a senior, and I was just starting high school. And I met him, and he graduated that year, but then I finished Carlisle High School then after he graduated. And
what was his name?
Charles Goodhart.
Charles Goodhart. Okay.
They called him Chuck, of course. Yeah.
So what did he do after graduating?
Well, after graduating, he worked. He told me, I didn't really know that much about him then, but he worked at J.C. Penney for a while. And then he worked at Beadham Lumber Company for a while, and then he went to work for the government. And he worked for the government for 35 years.
And what did he do when he was...
For the government? He was a system analyst for the nuclear submarines.
Wow.
Yeah. And he seemed to love his job. He traveled a lot. And we had 2 boys. And of course he would travel, and the boys and I were at home. But I really didn't mind,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, yeah.
And then you mentioned, were you still living in Mount Holly after you
When we got married, yes. We were married in the Methodist church that I was talking about.
Mount Zion?
No, the first one.
Okay.
The regular Methodist church, yeah. Right beside the Holly Library.
Yep.
And we were married there in 51. And we kept going there. And then, I don't remember the year it was, but then the church, it joined with the EUB church, and it was still in the Methodist church. But then they built a new church up on, up off of Moreland Avenue in Mount Holly, up where the school was, yeah. And I don't think that's when we started to Mount Zion, but I don't know. That must have been around that time, because, our boys were born when we went to the Baltimore Avenue Methodist Church. We were married there, and they were baptized, and I think both the boys joined the church there, yeah. And then we moved out to the Petersburg Road in Carlisle. And that's when we started taking my husband's parents to church, to the Mount Zion Church, and that's how we got involved with that one.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, could you describe your wedding a little bit?
Oh, yeah. It was wonderful. The thing I remember mostly about our wedding, besides getting married, was we had a terrible thunderstorm that day, and my mother had to come to Carlisle from Mount Holly to get something, and our power, we had an awful thunderstorm. The power went out, my bridesmaids were coming to get ready at my house. We had no power. The wedding was at 8 in the evening. It was a candlelight service, and I'm so glad that I planned that candlelight service, or we wouldn't have had one. And that man couldn't play the organ that I had asked Mr. Fisher, and he called me and he said he didn't play the piano, and if there was no power, he couldn't play the organ. So I thought, what am I going to do? So my sister had a friend, Joyce Hamilton, and she said, well, I'm sure maybe Joyce would play the piano. So she contacted Joyce. She lived on East Pine Street, but not real close to us, on over toward the square. And of course she said yes. So she saved the day. But we got married in candlelight, and we had the reception downstairs in the candlelight. Power never come on till 10 o'clock that night. But we had a lovely wedding. Yeah.
Was it big, or was it?
It was big.
Was it?
I had, oh my gosh, I think 5 bridesmaids.
Oh, wow.
And my husband had 5 groomsmen. Yeah. Yeah. And it lasted till my husband died when we were married, 63 and a half years.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I probably should have asked this first, but why did you decide to get married to Mr. Goodhart?
Well, he wanted to get married.
Did he?
And he wanted to get married as soon as I got out of high school.
Okay.
And I said, no, I want to wait at least a year. So we did. I graduated in 50, and we were married in June of 51. Yep.
And was he still working at JCPenney or at Beadham?
No, he was working at the Navy Supply Depot
Oh, was he?
then. Yes,
Okay.
yes.
So he had a pretty stable job.
Oh, yes. Yes, I don't think I wouldn't have wanted to get married if he was still working at Penny's or the lumber yard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know Mount Holly has changed quite a bit over the years, too.
Mm-hmm.
I'm wondering if you could sort of describe what it was like when you were growing up.
Well, there was one grocery store, Arnold's Grocery.
Mm-hmm.
The candy plant wasn't there, but the ice house was back there where it was. There was one doctor, Dr. Stayer. He was beside the theater. There was, I don't think there was a dentist in Mount Holly at that time. We had, yes there was, but I can't remember his name. He was up around the Holly Inn. He lived in a home, and he had the office in his home there, yeah. And there was another little house up on Hill Street. It's a house, and then there was a little grocery store in the basement. And that was run by Billy Myers. And he and his wife, they never had any children, but they had that store. And I can remember there was no florist in Mount Holly. There was no funeral director there. My grandmother died when I was in 3rd grade, and I remember Mother had Schulenberger from Carlisle come out, get her. And then I was going to tell you something, and it slipped out of my mind. We didn't have a funeral director. There was something I wanted to tell you. Maybe it'll come back to me. But everybody, I know what it was I wanted to tell you. Up by Billy Myers' store, he lived on Hill Street, was the street that goes up across from the Holly Inn. Well, there was Hollinger Street that went down beside his opening of his store. And when we were kids, they used to, when we'd have a big snow, they would block that street. And we would go up, clear up to Hill Street, up Hollinger Street. And then they had West Pine Street blocked, this way, so the kids could go down, go across West Pine Street, and the firehouse at that time was right there on the corner. It's no longer there. And we would go down by the firehouse down the alley as far as we could go, sledding. And it was wonderful. Yes. We loved it when it snowed then because, we had a lot of fun. But we got a lot of exercise, walking all the way up Hollinger Street, clear up to Hill Street. Yeah, and it was all hill. But that was important to us kids then, yeah. And Holly was a very quiet little town. There was no theater then when I was real little or anything. No, but everybody seemed to get along, and the stores weren't open on Sundays. And if you knew that if you needed something for Sunday, you went to the grocery store Saturday.
I guess for me, one of the things that I never saw, certainly, I moved to the area in 2014, but were the mansions where a lot of the, where Family Dollar is now, and then the...
Okay, where the Family Dollar was, that was a mansion.
Yep.
And we passed that every day when we went to school. Of course, we never went into it or anything. And they had a swimming pool in the backyard that you could see it. A big backyard clear over to the creek. But I really don't know who owned that mansion at that time, but there was a doctor who bought it after the people, when the people sold it that had it when I was real little. Yeah, yeah. And we always walked up the side and then down, the street to go back to the school. Yeah. And no one ever bothered you or did anything. Yeah. But I can't remember of ever going to that house on Halloween. Kids would go out and we would go to different houses all over Mount Holly. And there was a man who was very active in politics, Mr. Dosh. And he always gave us a nickel. And we always hit his house, because that was a lot then. Yeah. And on Front Street, I remember the store. It was run by Mr. and Mrs. Reese. It was a hardware store beside it. I don't remember the people's name that had that, but it became Mumal's Hardware and then Ray Otto's Hardware after that. And but this was a house right along there, and you go in there and they had this candy case that was glass, but it was rounded, and they'd have all this penny candy, and some of them you get a couple things for a penny. And when we got those nickels, boy, we would just rush there, and they had little tiny paper bags but him and her were always dressed in black, very, they went to the Methodist Church. They're very nice people. But you never saw them in anything but real good clothes. But that was, and then they sold things besides candy, like they would sell lanterns and all that sort of thing. Yeah. But I remember that real well.
I'm just thinking, how much the streetscape has changed in a way.
Well, that bridge that went over East Pine Street, that's been all, changed. That was just a little tiny bridge. There was never a walkway. And we kids, when we learned to swim, we learned to swim in that creek up to the right behind the hardware store. We called it Freddy's. Maybe that was the name of the man that owned the hardware store. I don't know. But that's where we all learned to swim when we were little. And we were never afraid of drowning or anything, but we could have very easily. But, and when it was ice skating time, my dad always took all of us kids plus our friends, we just pack them in the car, and we go down to Otto's on the way to Boiling Springs. Right outside of Boiling Springs, there was a farm. And my mother used to buy fresh milk there. And when it would freeze, that creek would freeze. And Daddy used to take us down there and we'd ice skate. And I remember we had a friend along one time that got so cold she started crying, and I took her up over the hill to the house, and I asked them if she could come in a while and get warm, you know. And they were very nice people, though. But they said sure, so I went back and skated some more. Yeah.
There was I think where the pharmacy is now, there used to be like a soda fountain?
That was Doc Snyder's drugstore.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And he had the best ham and pickle sandwiches, I remember. We used to go in there and get Cokes all the time, and he had booths to sit in after school. Not all the time after school, because we didn't have the money to do that. But when we did, that was a treat. But you could get your drugs there, yes. And he was a real nice man. He lived overhead of the store. Yes.
Is that what you mainly got, was soda, like Coke, or?
It was a soda fountain.
Yeah.
They make sodas and sundaes, and they sold sandwiches. Some lady that worked for him made the things for the sandwiches. But there was some people that kind of, older people, who would hang out there, I guess, and talk and all that. But us kids would go to the back and get out of their way.
At that time, did they do the ice cream sodas? Or did
They had ice cream in cones, those little short cones. And they make real good root beer floats. Yeah, but milkshakes, all that. Yeah.
Okay. Because I remember interviewing Richard Gobin.
Yes,
and
yes.
He mentioned there was a difference between a soda, ice cream soda, and a float.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
There is. There is, yeah.
Did you prefer the float stuff?
Yes, I did. Yeah. Well, that was sold to someone else after Dr. Snyder passed away. I can't remember. Oh, what was their name? Wagner? I think there was a Wagner that bought this drugstore. And then after he died, then I think Gobin took over. Yes, yes. But I've never been in it but once since Gobin, because, you know, I live in Carlisle and I get my meds in CVS and all this. So, so there's been a lot of change in Mount Holly. Yes, down where the beer thing is, where they sell beer, across from Hollinger Funeral Home.
Yep.
There used to be a Mr. Bob's Garage. It's no longer there. And let's see, Sparky Hartzell used to have a garage back on Chestnut Street. When he died, that was it for that. And we used to have a canning factory in Mount Holly. They canned tomatoes. And that was close our house. We were over in East Pine Street, and you crossed over the railroad. And right where you crossed over the railroad, on the right, was the tomato factory. Now I think that that land, there's no factory there anymore. That land was owned by the paper company, Schweitzer's, at that time. But they used to have women come, and they would check to make sure that tomatoes had no bacteria and all that. And my mother let them have one of the rooms in our house to stay while they came. It wasn't always the same person. They were always different. But Mr. Neipel, who lived at the corner of West Pine Street and Chestnut Street, he owned that tomato factory. And they come in with big trucks of tomatoes, and they'd pile them up real big, you know. And then they would put them through. we kids now we never got close to them because our parents told us you couldn't.
Sure.
But we go over and they would put them in a thing and wash the tomatoes. And then they go and the people would pick out the ones that weren't so good. And then they would go through the process of, I guess, cutting them and putting them in cans and all this and that. And I can remember there was a railroad station there, and my uncle, Dave Worst, he was a half-brother of my mother's. They had the same mother, but not the same father. And he worked at that railroad station. And we used to go over there when we were kids, and they had a chiclet machine, and he'd always give us a penny to get chiclets out of there. But we would stay on closer to the railroad crossing. We couldn't stand on the railroad tracks, of course, but there was the canning factory right beside that, and we used to go there and stand and watch when they put the labels on and all that. The same tomatoes would get all kinds of labels. So when when I go to the grocery store, I know that I'm not going to hunt for the most expensive thing because it's best. Because they all come out the same thing. Yeah, and that was amazing to me. Yeah.
When you mentioned the railroad, it reminded me of something. So when sort of coming to Carlisle, when you go underneath the railroad bridge there.
Down the end of Mount Holly.
There was a park, wasn't there?
Yes, right beyond that, where you go under the railroad.
Mm-hmm.
There's a house that's well, there's apartments there now that wasn't there then. And there, when I was little, I can remember my dad taking us back into that park. Mm-hmm. They wouldn't have a lot of rides, but they had a few. And then they had music and everything. But then, I was pretty small when we did that. But then as we got older, I guess that closed and it was sold. And I don't think there was ever anything put in there again. Mm. Yeah.
Well, you mentioned, you said that was when you were little. And
yes.
You mentioned after school you would occasionally go to Doc Snyder's.
Yes.
What did you do did you spend a lot of time in Carlisle in high school?
No.
Or you came right back to
we came back to Mount Holly.
What did you do for amusement then?
Where, in Holly?
Sure, yep.
Oh, we would climb the mountains. I was a tomboy when I was young. And my older sister took piano lessons at the house. My younger sister had the violin that she played. My brother played the clarinet, and my other brother had passed on by then. But they wanted me to take lessons in something, and I said, I don't want to. So they didn't make me. But I had a very good friend, Jenny Lee Tishy. We're still friends. We're both 85, and we've been friends since we've been 4 years old. And we still go out and eat once a week on Tuesday mornings for breakfast. And we've always gotten along so good. And she and I would go over my house. Our house was the third house over the railroad. And then there was, 2 more houses after that before you got to the mountain, to go up Mountain Street. Yeah. And she and I would go over there on that mountain, and we'd climb that mountain. And we'd sit up on the top of the sandbank, which was up across from the lower paper mill. We'd look out over Mount Holly, and we'd pick our beauties. And there was a little stream down at the bottom that ran along. We'd gather frog eggs, and we'd try to get frogs to come out. We never had any success, but that's the kind of things we did. And then we didn't have a lot of toys because, your parents didn't have a lot of money. And we never had a lot of dolls or anything like that. There might have been one doll that we all played with. But I remember we had a big mock orange tree out behind our house, and we played in the center of that tree. And it was beside Guy Pratt and his wife. And we go in around that way to go into it. My mother or anybody couldn't see us in there. But the kids that lived around us, we would go in there and we'd make mud pies and pretend we were, had a store. And most of it was pretend things. And we make dolls out of hollyhock flowers, and we line our dolls up and we make them dance. And, it was all things that we had to do because we didn't have the board games and all that, and it didn't hurt us.
Now, did that change when you had children, or?
Oh yeah, but the time I had my boys, it was in 52 and 55. Yeah, things had changed, and they played baseball. I don't even remember of any children having baseball games or anything when I was real little. They might have played ball, but it wasn't regular baseball like they play now. My husband coached baseball for the Little League for quite a few years.
Okay.
When our boys were young, But things have changed a lot.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, so what did you do for fun after you were married and you had kids? Or?
Oh, after we were married and had the kids, we took the kids to animal places like over in Fairfield. They loved animals. And then my husband went in the Army for 2 years, and we moved to South Carolina. And when we come back from there, I think Jim was in first grade, and Jim would have been about 6, so John would have been about 3. Yeah. And after we got home and all, we go out and take the kids to like Willow Park and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, Williams Grove. And we did things like that. And then, of course, with them playing baseball, that kept them busy all summer. Yeah. Yep, so it was a different life then.
Yeah.
Than when I grew up. Yeah. But I'm glad I grew up in the years that I did, because I don't have anything that I wished wouldn't have happened. No.
And then did you stay at home, or did you have your own business, or did you work?
After I was married?
Yep.
I worked at the candy plant in the office in accounts receivable. When John started kindergarten, that's when I started working. And Jenny Lee's, my friend, Jenny Lee Tishy, her father owned the candy plant. So he was pretty easy with me. He owned Pennsylvania Dutch Candies.
Okay.
And when John started school, he was 4. And Jenny's father asked me if I'd like to, come to work for him.
Sure.
And I said, well, if I could work the same hours the boys were in school. He said, oh, sure. So I went to work and worked in the office during the school year. When school was out, then I quit. And I wouldn't work in the summer when the boys were home. So I stayed home, with the boys through their schooling. And then in 1960-something, early 60s, I decided I wanted to be a beautician. And I went to beauty school the same months that my boys went to school in Carlisle. Because, they went to Carlisle. But they went earlier than what I did. They didn't have, I forget how many years they went to Mount Holly, but it wasn't up to 9th grade. They went in before that. And so they went in there, and then I went to beauty school. And then till I get home in the evening, they were old enough anyway. School bus was gone before I leave in the morning. And I finished my beauty school while they were finishing school. And then I opened my beauty shop in my own home in Mount Holly. And I had that for about 7 years. And then we moved to the Petersburg Road in Carlisle. And where we moved, you couldn't have a beauty shop in your house. So Joyce Morgan called me and asked me to come to work for her, but my husband said, why don't you just stay home? And, the boys are older, but they were still in school. And he said, so that's what I did. And then I did work about 6 months down at the Navy Supply Depot for a contractor. But then I quit that and stayed at home. Because we have 3.5 acres, and I loved to work in flowers, and I mowed the grass while my husband was at work and all that sort of thing.
And do you have your own garden, or?
Oh yeah, big garden, 180 by 200 feet.
Wow.
It was a truck patch, really, because we had plenty of acreage, and we planted fruit trees and pine trees and all that kind of stuff. But we loved to be outside doing things like that. Yeah, we did. Yep.
Well, so actually, I got asked this question
Yeah.
by some young kids, and I didn't really have an answer because I was much older than them. But I'm wondering, is there any advice or any important lessons that you learned from your parents, maybe, or just from life and having your own shop, or?
Well, I've learned that you have to, be patient, and you have to love everyone, really. And I'm a Christian, and I believe if you have trouble, you put it in God's hands. And I think that's the only way you can make things work out, and not argue and fight and all that. You have to be patient. Yes.
I'm sure that's how you ended up being married for over 60
years.
Yes,
and my husband, he was just as religious as I was, and he was a Sunday school teacher and different churches that we went to, and we just, I don't know. I'm just thankful for everything that I have and what has happened in my life. And my boys now are both retired, and my oldest one retired from PPG, and my youngest one was the chief of naval support for the in Mechanicsburg. He worked in Washington for a while, but then he came back here, and he was chief of naval support worldwide, and he had a wonderful job, but he's retired now. They take real good care of me. And I've been having some health problems with my heart and everything. They take me down to Camp Hill for my appointments and to the hospital and all that sort of thing.
Now, do you have any grandkids?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I have 3 grandkids, 2 boys and one I finally got a girl. Katie lives over around Ortana, and Benjamin lives down below Harrisburg in Pembroke, and Dom lives out Spring Road in Carlisle. He's the oldest one. And he's very good to me. He's always calling me, asking me if I need anything. And then I have 7 great-grandchildren. Wow. Yes. Nice family.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, the last thing that I'll ask is there anything I should have asked, or that maybe that you want to mention before we?
Not really, to be honest with you.
All right.
No, I enjoyed talking to you.
Thank you so much for sharing your memories.
Sure.
It's been great.
Yeah, it's wonderful. I love Mount Holly.